Okay, I was Willie Mae Clark, named after my father. My father was named William, and I was born in Bristol, Washington County, Virginia side. Went to school at Douglas, and I don't have a birth certificate. And to get passport, I had to call all the way back to the school district to find out when I entered as kindergarten, or they called it then primary, to find out if I could get somebody to tell me my age so I could figure that out. So a lot of times I tease folks and say, I don't have a birth certificate, so I can be any age I want to. Other than that, I enjoyed myself going to school in Bristol, and on different sides of town. We just didn't get to know the people in that way. I grew up not having a car. We uh, used taxis if we needed to go somewhere further than we wanted or very cold. Finally, the city got bus service, which was I had to walk at least from here. You're here up to the corner, see what it, and that wasn't too far to catch the bus to go into town, come back and walk that far, see at least a good block to your home again.
Hmm.
I remember going to school and living on a farm, pretty good, trying to give her some idea what I'm talking about. From this is Prairie Avenue, and that's Powder House. Our farm was that much and wide, and I had chickens, hogs, cow, all that, and good vegetables, fruit, and everything growing up. And we were not incorporated into the city yet. And oh, I guess I was about 8 or 9, and they incorporated that property. They didn't take anything. It just certain part of it was part of the city, and the other part was still in the county. And the part that was in the city was our home. And we were kind of tickled with that because we had water, but we didn't have sewer. So we probably got both. And that was kind of nice. Had to get rid of one of the cows. We were still allowed to have the other uh, hogs, chickens, turkeys, geese, whatever, because that was in part was in the county. And it was nice growing up there. Um, my mom, I guess when I was about 8 or 9, decided she wanted to um, have a grocery store. And this young lady sitting here, what do you think this size of my house is? Very small. So would it be 100 square feet, maybe, or not? Not. Somewhere in, it was small. And she had a little grocery store there. And uh, there were, if I remember, two families of Negroes that lived there. The rest were Caucasian, and that was her income from the neighbors around her. It was very good for her, and she enjoyed it. She had all the milk companies, Valladale Packers. I don't remember the name of the milk company, and Moore's potato chip was about 2 blocks from us. So if we ran out of potato chips and other things that they produced, I could walk to the little factory and get them, bring them back, and did that. So, and it was interesting being at that time. I didn't know the difference when you grew up being so small. Then you didn't know whether you were segregated against or not. And I'd walk into potato chip factory and they, good morning, little Miss Clark. And I say, good morning. My mom needs 3, 4, 5 dozen potato bags of potato chips that you could buy for 5 cents a bag. And I could walk all the way to town, which was good 10 long blocks. And because we didn't have telephones everywhere, you had one telephone in the home, and that was it. Didn't have a telephone in the little grocery store. So I would take her order, written out order, what she needed from the manufacturer, and give it to them, and they would take it from me. They finally got used to seeing me, especially as they became 12 or 13 years old, bringing her order in every Monday morning. In the summer, um, in the afternoon after school, I would take it in, get there about 4 o'clock, come back home. Um, and they deliver the products the next day, canned goods and flour, sugar, coffee, all of that kind of stuff. Valleydale Packers, if somebody said, I'd like to have 2 pounds of pork chops or a 5 pound roast or whatever, she'd write that down. Valleydale Packers then would pack it up separately for her, and just 5 pound pork chops, 2 pound pork chop, 5 pound roast, or 3 pound roast. All she had to do was match that with the customer who had ordered it. In the summer, we had that huge vegetable garden. We always had fresh string beans, fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, corn, just everything. And the other people, neighbors that were living in the area, if they wanted to go into town and buy food, that was okay, but during the week, that would run out and they'd be there with my mom, and they enjoyed it. I come in there, especially on Friday night and Saturday night, because nothing was open on Sunday. And I grew up going downtown to the five and dime store. There was, I don't know whether it's still there in that name or not, H.P. King's, a big department store. Um, there was Belts. Can't even think of the first part of it. Belts department store. Uh, there was a fashion bar, very outstanding ladies store, and a little lady. If this young lady will turn around and see that big plant right there, that was given to me from a little lady on Moore Street that had a hat shop, so hats, gloves, purses, things like that. No shoes, that's just what she sold. And I'd go in about every time I was in town when I was 14 or 15 and 16, then because I liked pretty clothes. And when I went in, she had this particular plant in her shop. And I said, that is this philodendron. That I finally thought of it. Um, and I said, oh, one of these days, I just asked her, would you have an extra one? She said, sure. So she dug one up immediately. That is a product of that same plant when I was 15 or 16 years old. But that big old wide one, the tall, skinny one, I don't remember what that name is either, but it's the big wide plant. I had that. It went through the tornado in 79 here and left with one little leaf hanging. But I got along growing up. I think it was just a little different from me. It's not just me. The other young ladies and the other kids that attended Douglas that I knew of had no problems with segregation per se. We just, can I tell you funny that I didn't know any different. I I think it was Rose's five and dime store. They had it wasn't Woolworths, and Woolworths was always considered yucky or something. And we had a Woolworths, but I didn't know anything different. Um, this was Rosie's, and they had two drinking fountains near the back of the store, and one said white and one said colored. And I'm standing there, and my older sister, my mother had married before, was 12 years older than I was, and I was, I guess, 7 or 8 years old at the time, and I'm standing there trying to decide which one of those water fountains I wanted to drink from, because one said white and one said color. And so I went over to the white, and my sister came over and says, "You're not supposed to drink out of that fountain." And I looked at her and said, "Why?" "She's supposed to drink the colored." I said, "I don't have any colored water at home. My water is white at home." And the clerk behind the counter, and I didn't pay that much attention until I got a little older to realize it. I think she was in stitches. She was laughing so hard. And my sister says, "We're just going to," and by that time I'd finished drinking, so it was no big deal. So when I got home, my sister was telling my parents about it. Well, my dad died. He just cracked up, and my mom kind of giggled too a little bit. But as I got older and realized that, I thought, well, I did. My water was nice and clear and clean. It wasn't colored, so I wasn't drinking it. And you and I finally, getting to be about 12 years old, I would think about that sometimes and laugh to myself because I really didn't know any better. And it was funny. And I thought, and once in a while, I'll remember that. It's just kind of the way I grew up. Went to the movies, and they said you can't use the floor, lower floor for movie. I said, well, that was a nice thing for them to do. And one of my friends said, why? I said, because who wants to sit there and try to peek around somebody's head to look at a movie when I'm up in the balcony and this is, you don't have to do that. So they said, well, you got a point there. So, like I said, as far as I knew, we could go in and out the stores, try on coats and hats, shoes, or whatever, and we were never bothered. The only time, you spent 1 year at Clark University, and the girl was saying, "You want to try that hat on?" This was in the 50s. And I said, "Yeah, why can't I try this hat on?" She says, "Well, they know that Negro people use oil or hair grease and they don't want that in the hat." I said, "I tried hats on up in Bristol. Nobody ever told me that. And by that time I had the hat on. And so I said, well, no big deal. I wasn't ever treated like this. So I took the hat off, looked at it, made sure there wasn't anything wrong with it, and set it down. And the clerk was there looking, but she didn't say anything. And I said, well, I won't do that anymore until I've decided if I want to buy the hat or I said, but how do you know it's going to look like right if you don't try it on? So I didn't even try to do that again because I thought I don't need to make any problems if possible. So those about the only two things during my segregated life that I ran into at all. Just had a nice time going to school and went to Morristown and had that 1 year at Clark and then came home. I don't know what it was. I hadn't got used to a college that large, and I had three other roommates. My little trunk that I had, I couldn't leave it in the classroom. You had to store it down in the basement or somewhere and go to get your clothes every once in a while. And that, just too many people in one bedroom as far as I was concerned. So I came home. And then when I went to Virginia State, started out in the summer school and had one roommate, which made sense to me, and got through that okay. And my mom said, even as a country girl, as I say, um, I had my own bedroom. The only time I remember not having my own bedroom was when my sister was still at home, and we had twin beds in one bedroom. We had a big old two-story house with had 4 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms downstairs, 2 upstairs, living room, dining room, and a kitchen, and a little offshoot for um, a commode and wash basin and a sink in the kitchen. And I guess I was 12 years old before my parents had an electric stove or washing machine or refrigerator and things like that. And my mom, I guess I left Bristol um, right now when I married a Gillenwater from Abingdon, Virginia. And she was still living, and my father was still living, and all not had anything going for them, but just on the property. The little building still stood there forever until city came through the county, state, and wanted to buy the property to widen Moore Street and Randall Street, which intersect there, right next to Douglas School that was left. And I went back in 2019. My daughter passed from stroke, and we decided to drive up to Bristol to see what it looked like. Didn't look like the same place, just completely different. And was expecting it to. Didn't get to see any friends that I knew or thought maybe was there. The young lady that was they're almost like sisters for my daughter, was still living in her house up near VI College, Virginia Lamont College. And I didn't know she was there, or I would have contacted her by all means. Her name is Gloria English. And we still keep in touch. The young lady, she's in her about the same age my daughter. They're about the same age. She's 70, I think, and my daughter was a year older. And she's still there, correspond with her. Kind of delighted to think I'm lived to be 98 years old. My mom,
Yeah. What was her name and where did she?
that was her name was Nanny Bell Penn was her maiden name. She married a man from my brother and sister named Hamptons. My sister's name was Awilta, Awewilta, and my brother was named after his father, John Hampton. My sister's middle name was Virginia. My brother's name was Rufus. That was from for his grandfather on in my mother's side. I don't know that much about them. My grandfather was Rufus Penn. He got an old picture here somewhere for him. He was from Ireland. Has a world red mustaches and everything. He worked uh, for J.C. Penney, that big department store. And I remember um, my grandmother telling me that they asked him why did he want to marry a Negro woman. And he said, well, I just think the Negro race is a beautiful race. There's so many different colors, it's like a flower garden. So I don't think the gentleman, I remember that, and I thought to myself, yeah, there are so many different colors. My mother grew up from what is Slater High School on Tennessee side. That was called Bristol Normal Institute. And she finished that, and she was always very proud of. I finished Bristol Normal Institute. And my sister finished high school in Douglas. My brother was an excellent pianist and played in a little orchestra for the round town and in different areas. And my sister finished high school, met a young man out of Meadowview, Virginia, named Augusta Lockett. They had no children. My brother had 5 children. Um, one daughter is still alive, Nanetta Biddy, and she lives in Florida. I know she has one daughter, and a son. And I'm trying to think of else. My grandmother was named Callie, Calie, Callie Penn, but she came from some part in Middle America, near Guatemala, somewhere down through there. She didn't know where. But I remember my mother saying, her mother telling her they moved to Bristol from Blowing Rock, North Carolina. So that's about as much as I know about that side of the family. The Clarks were from Patrick County, Virginia. And my grandfather on that side was Caucasian, and I do not know what my grandmother was, but she's tall and skinny, and she had 4 boys and a girl. My aunt was named Flora. But I hope I can think of what my father's name was William. There was Rufus, Robert, Charles, and I cannot ever think. The other boy I think had passed, and I didn't remember him right now if I wanted to. It's just, something you don't think of very often. And I visited there in Martinsville quite often when I was little. And then I guess family just drifted apart. They had property there, and I never forget, um, they wanted to sell the property, and I said, wait a minute, let's get a lawyer here before you sign any papers. And my dad did listen to me that time and got more money than they were offered in the first place. They said they wanted it for timber because it was on the side of a mountain or hill or whatever you want to call it. But they were going to build apartments or houses or whatever, and you can imagine what that would have been like. Um, that went on, young man, for a number of years. Um, Finally, they got it all settled, and the last money that came to me from that property was like 5 years ago. I still got so much money a year out of that because of my father. And my father lived to be 90. My mother lived to be 76. My father lived to be 94. And I'm tickled pink. I thought I'll never live to be that age, and here I'm 4 years older than the amount. And I keep telling God, I'm not ready to die yet. I'm still able to move, walk, and talk. And I have can you imagine me having a driver's license? I still drive. I only drive when I need to. Other than that, Cheyenne is a nice little town to live in. Um, very political now. Well, I think everywhere is very political. But I can remember moving here. The governor could go and not have a bodyguard or anything. And now I guess you wouldn't dare send the governor out without a bodyguard or something. And I don't go to church. Been a little year or so when I stop because when you don't hear well, um, you go to church to hear what I go to church to hear the sermon. Sure, have friends I see that I don't see all the time, and that's great. But I'm not going to go for that. I want to go hear the sermon.
What did your father do for a living?
Oh, he was a barber, and after that faded away, he and another gentleman had barber shops downtown Bristol, and this clientele would come into their barber shop. Then when he get with that, my father didn't. Oh, young man, I don't know what happened. My father didn't want to be any part of that grocery store with my mom. So he got a job with the post office and was a janitor for a post office then for the rest of his time. And my mom said, would you like to go do, I don't want to go in there to do anything. After you get a certain age, you kind of giggle at your parents when you hear my father. No, no. Now, if my mom was be on a Sunday, especially, and she's uh, preparing dinner, so she said, I need so and so out of the store. Would you go get it from? That's about as close as he'd get with me to go get something. And growing up, and my sister, she would say, she asked him, Dave, why you don't like? He said, I not that good. He had maybe eighth grade education. And he says, I'm not that good with money or weighing things. And I just don't want any part of it. So my mom didn't give him a hard time about it at all. That was just one part he didn't like. He worked for the post office and enjoyed that. And he did that until he retired and drew Social Security and from the post office. And my mom didn't get any Social Security because she didn't pay any into it. And so that didn't seem to bother them. They had saved up a little money of their own. She also, evidently, when I was small, they were state was putting through Highway 11 east and west. And that was the name of a little grocery store, Five Point. It was a 5 Point section right there. And her little store was 5 Point grocery store. So when they began to blast the top of one big hill there, um, they didn't know where they wanted to find a place to dump the big rock. And we had a part of our property was a slope down and then up. And my father said, you can dump them down here. And when my back year, I'm trying to think of the year, 40, no, it wasn't that. 45, my mom got that rock. Had a gentleman out of either North Carolina or South Carolina, don't remember, to come. And how she found out about him, he had built there and built a small church for a congregation of people at a rock.
Hmm.
And she asked him, would he build her a house? And he did, and had 3 bedrooms, kitchen, dining room, living room, back porch, front porch with a little stoop. It was a whole porch, but just enough at the front door. And the back porch was all the way across, and a nice sized basement that she used a coal furnace for until they began to get old. And I persuaded them to clean it out and use it for a gas furnace, and they began to do that. But this man built this big rock house and they lived there forever. I got some pictures somewhere in some of my books, and it was facing Moore Street. Um, you come down the hill from the college was Moore Street, and they had their property, house built on the property, and maybe it was 50 feet between the house and the little grocery store. They remodeled that, and I guess it was a 50 by 50 building at that time. And they remodeled that, made the little grocery store bigger. And my mom was just tickle pink to be there. And I went to college and came back and helped. And then I got married and had children, lost my husband to cancer, and they didn't know a thing about cancer back then. And so I raised my two children for about 8 years and met a gentleman named Rollard. Married him. That didn't last. I was looking for what I had, thought I had, and you just don't do that when you're young and stupid. You left. And um, had a son. So I had these two boys is what I have now. They make sure I'm okay. They wanted me to come in when I married Gillenwater. We bought the property here in '69, and then he got a job as a scout executive, and we moved back to Kansas City area. So we lived in Overland Park, Kansas, uh, until '79, and that came the tornado and wiped out my little house and had to build again. But my boys finished school there. Youngest Rolite finished TCU, and my son went 2 years at Baker and married and worked for General Motors. He retired at least 5 or 6 years ago and went back to Baker and got his theology degree, and now he works with the big church there in Olathe, Kansas. They live close to each other. He lives in Olathe, Kansas. The young son lives in Shawnee, Kansas, and so they're doing well. And they said, "Come and live in this area for me." And I said, "No, I don't know anybody there anymore."
Did you attend church while you were in Bristol? And did your parents attend church?
John Wesley Methodist
Hmm.
is still there. I don't know whether anybody. I was talking to Gloria not too long ago, and she said there just weren't very many people anymore, but they have a new pastor, I think she said, at the Baptist church,
Hmm.
and seem to be gaining some more members. I don't know. She didn't remember who the pastor was at John Wesley. And I said, still standing? And she said, yeah, it was still standing. When I was a little girl,
Mhm.
I remember his name, Reverend Forrest. And he was the type of pastor that would visit homes and sit and talk for at least 10 or 15 minutes at different times. Not every month, but at least twice a year, you'd see him in your home, you know. Um, I remember him because I used to sit and listen to him, just would just enjoyed hearing him. Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other pastors' names the last time I was there.
What about, do you remember some of the other families that went to church with you?
Yes, there was a King and Rosa Brody. The Lacey family had a large family. I was friends with their last children. They were twins, two girls, Edith and Eva. Um, uh, a little tale that went along with the brother that was a little older. There were two boys. One I didn't know this family very well, but they were the DeLapp family. And the Lacey families, these two young men were very good friends. They did something to a neighbor or somewhere, and the man somehow took him to jail. They got caught or doing something, or he said they did it. But their names, the Lacey boy's name was Alvin, and I'm trying to think now the Dillette boy. I can't remember his name, but their nicknames were Pink Lacey, and Mike Dillette. And so when they read, this is another funny, when they read the boys' names out as Alvin Lacey, and yeah, Mike Dillette, whatever it was. No, 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 no. This man says, these are not the boys. These are not the boys. They were Pink and Mike. And they got off completely because he was going by their nickname. You see, because he asked somebody what their names were, and they said, this is Pink and this is Mike, because you know how kids are. They didn't mean to not give him the correct name, but that's just the way it went. He remembered Pink and Mike. But the police and the lawyers, had the correct given name. So this reminds says there are different things I can remember a little bit of because it was funny. So that was my principal in high school was Wallace Hayes. His wife was Bernice Hayes, and she was a music teacher. She could play a piano and had all the choirs at high school. And she also taught English and literature. Very good. We enjoyed it. We used to remember latter part of poems. And there's another funny. Uh, we were allowed to learn different sections of poems, and this one was the Raven. Remember the Raven?
Yep.
And we were to learn at least, I think it was 5 or 6 lines of it by heart and repeat it, and everything. So I was being honored this particular day, and this is how it came out, and I hope I can remember. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I ponder, weak and weary, and my English teacher, where did you come up with that? And so I said, I said, it just sounded like it ought to be like that. She said, would you go back and say it correctly? It just once in a while you do run it. I remember a few of the little things you did in school. And so I went back and said it right. Once upon a midnight dreary while I ponder, weak and weary, up upon something faint forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, something came a tapping, tapping at my chamber door. See, I remember a little bit of it, but that's about it. But we did do funny things in school, and um, I'm trying to think of who else was there. Brody's, Lacey's, on Tennessee side school, the Vitamins, Harris. Right now I can't think of anybody else. Coming to my church. That was the ones that came to my church. I'm sure they were others that went to Baptist church or AME Zion church. There was there too.
Do you know where are your parents buried at?
Whereas where my father's is buried in Johnson City at the veterans home. My parents are in I think an old fashioned garden that were there for the Negroes. She's in that plot. It is to the west of the city. There used to be another college there called Ladies College. So it's in that part past Virginia High School now. It's out past that, kind of up in the area.
Okay.
but I know it's west of the city.
Okay.
And that Sullins College was the name of the college. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's west down in that area past Sullins College.
Okay. Now you said you went to Douglas. Did you go to Douglas for elementary school as well?
Oh, it's from primary all the way through. Primary room, second, third. My teacher was Miss, I'll think of it eventually. My second grade teacher was Miss E.P. Mayo. That's how you called her. Her husband was a minister, I believe, for the Baptist church. He was Reverend Mayo. Uh, Here's something I remember to this day and often use it because we were in the um, cloakroom taking off our overshoes and hanging out coats from a snowstorm. We did not stay at home on snow days. If we had a foot of snow, we still went to school. So that's just the way it was. Some of these kids live maybe a mile on the Virginia side, that divided Tennessee and Virginia to get to school, and they walked and made it to school. It seems odd, but we were all complaining about, oh, it's so bad outside, and we were just complaining, and she heard us, and she says, "Let me get you kids, young ladies, and straight right now." And because of her husband being a man, she says, none of God's days are bad. They may be disagreeable, but they are not bad. I've remembered it all these years. When we had the tornado here in 79, my neighbor said, "What do you just think about that?" I said, "Evidently I wasn't living right, or I wouldn't have my house tore down like this is now." And she looked at me, and she just had a little corner torn off, about that much. But these two houses, one, two, three, four, five, six on this side were gone. And the White House and on all over, if the mall had been there, it wouldn't have been standing. So I told her, she says, "Oh, you think somebody's not living right?" I said, "Of course." I said, "Don't you know you get punished when you don't live right?" And she told my husband at that time, "You know what your wife told me?" So she said we weren't living right. And then John said, "Well, we probably aren't," and just kept going wherever he was going. And she would laugh about that. She never forgot that. And she was an atheist. That's the reason why it bothered her, I think. And she was a very good person and everything. But I asked her one time why she didn't believe in God. She said she just didn't know. But she was German. Her husband was one of the best school teachers here in town for um, East High School. Taught there like 37 or 38 years. History and government and things. He was very, very, very good. Named Sidney Spiegel.
Do you remember the area of Bristol called Black Bottom that they called Black Bottom?
Yeah, I remember that.
Hmm.
But at my age, we weren't allowed in that area
Hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
And I often wondered why. And it was just across the street from the train station, train depot, and everything. Um, I think, I don't know why it got that name. I think because they were black owned properties and restaurants and things like that. The young lady that I was in my class in school, Myrtle Lee Carter. Her father owned a cab company there and was on the corner of, I think, Black Bottom, and if I can remember, encased about 3 blocks by 6 block area. I'm just trying to figure this out. It wasn't a huge area, but all of that, and nothing happened there that I know of to cause police or anything like that. Nothing like that. No killing, shooting, fighting, or what have you. But they had restaurants, barber shops, beauty parlors, and all that. And what was so funny, uh, the 2 or 3 block north from the train station, the capital of the city was sitting there. So
Oh,
that's why I'm saying that was just so close, you know. Uh, the closest I'd get to it was to go to the cab stand to get a cab if it was too cold or raining really hard or something that had been shopping downtown area. And because they weren't very far from this state street, as they call it, state line, I would say good 3 blocks from where they businesses started to the main street thoroughfare. And that's all you did. It was like, and maybe nightclub actions there, I don't know. But as we grew up, everything just kind of changed. It probably, I never did get there. Oh, and there had been times going from my church. You'd go, railroad tracks came between my church property and the rest of the going to the downtown area. Um, Sometimes we'd go that way to get out of the way of a big bridge over the creek. Was that those creeks look like rivers. It wasn't really out here where I'm living now. When they said that's a creek, it's a creek. It's about maybe 3 foot deep. But that creek that ran through Bristol was more like a river. And sometimes it would be up even almost with the bridge, and we could go around the other way and it wouldn't be so bad. And I'd go down, and they called that Front Street. Front Street was the main street between that property and the train depot. And it ran all the way up to a section that did a Y, a V, and then it branched, it just stopped there. The other names of the other streets were there. But from there, oh, it ran a good, 12 uh, blocks. It was a fairly long little street into town. Now, after it crossed into Tennessee, I don't know what they called it. Yeah, that's what made a difference. You'd get Front Street to State Street, and then to cross it and go on to the next street would be another name for it. It wouldn't be Front Street anymore. And that's about all I know about Black Bottom. It wasn't something they did anything terrible about. They're just an area of black businesses that I know. Oh, um, my time at Morristown, I enjoyed very much. This is what is so interesting. My first year there, I had a home ec teacher, but evidently she left. And my second year, I had another exactly name of me. Willie Mae Clark was my home ec teacher.
oh,
And you probably would find her name there also if you had looked or wanted to. And I had a boyfriend in the Navy. And when he'd get my never forget, I had written him, I says, I haven't heard from you in over a month. I'm not writing you anymore because you don't write back. He says, I write you every week. And Miss Clark had been cutting my letters from my boyfriend. So I asked her, well, I said, you didn't have a boyfriend in the Navy, Miss Clark. Why did you give me my letters? And she said, she looked at me and smiled. She said, well, I enjoyed reading them. So then it was funny. And she said, I enjoyed it. I said, well, she said, I just thought somebody knew me and was writing me. I said, did you realize this were coming to me? And she said, now I kind of figured this out, you know. But Morristown, and we had a maid lady that overlooked uh, um, oh, I can't think of the name of the dormitory. Her name was Miss Johnson, very strict, which didn't bother me one way or the other. You know, there were girls that had boyfriends on campus and different things like that, and she'd make sure you coming in. Yeah, I don't care if you're out on the right there where I can see you. You coming in. It's time for you to come in. You need to go study. You need to go do this. They had on Sunday afternoon. They had call hours, they called it, at 4 o'clock for about an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And they'd come and sit in the parlor in different places and laugh and talk together. And um, I didn't have a boyfriend on campus, and so it didn't bother me. It was nice to go in and wave at the guys, at the girls, and things like that. But other than that, it was simple, and I enjoyed being in the choir and uh, worked part time. That's how I made my extra money in the library. Um, Sometimes the guys would come in and girls or whoever and wanted to find something, and I'd go ask the librarian, "Where do you find that?" And she'd tell me, and I'd go get the books or whatever they wanted to use. Um, it was interesting. Ate family style in the dining hall. Very good food. Nothing. I hardly made breakfast. I would always made supper time. Um, Nice little campus, quiet. We had a little uh, extra restaurant like on campus that we could go soda pop or almost like a restaurant. We could buy snacks and all of that. And it was a lot of fun. We had our own washing machines in the basement where we did our own laundry. Or once in a while, we couldn't handle those our sheets and pillowcases, and my roommate and I would take them to the laundry in town, and they'd be ready in a couple of days, and we'd go and pick them up, and always had them nice. And it was nice to be able to do that too. They were always pressed, and we didn't have to iron them. We had one girl that came there once that could do your hair, and we were tickle pink that she was on campus. And she made our money doing that because we she charged $2 or $3 to do your hair. We were tickle pink to have her there, you know. She just was something she could do. Other than that, my first year I didn't make it back home for Thanksgiving because we were having a football game. And uh, next year, I think it was the same way, but always made it home for Christmas and Easter. And then end of school was always there. Um, I enjoyed working like here in Cheyenne, 2004. I got cancer and had to give up job here. So you don't go back and get those anymore. And enjoyed here. I started out here substituting, and I thought, okay, I'll probably get some extra money doing that, and ended up constantly going. I had uh, 2 years, different places at East High, whole almost. What was it like? The first year spent all this was substituting now, not regular work, a whole year, and about 2 weeks left in the school year, the teacher came back. And over at Central High, I taught there for 3 months. they call long term. And after that, everybody says, okay, she can handle a classroom. Uh, I was constantly on the go and got a divorce and had two jobs, uh, up in the morning early and make it to school by 8 o'clock and out at least 4, clock in at Joslyn's department store tomorrow at 5 to 9 or 9:30 whenever I got out. Whenever people stopped shopping. And I did that until I paid for my house. My house was finished being paid for in 92. And after that, I kind of slowed down that way. A young lady from West Wyoming, and I can't think of the little town. Oh, why can't I think of the name? Came here, got a job at Johnson Junior High, and had worked a year and a half. What happened there, the little boy went home and told a fib on the teacher on a Friday. The mother went to the school district. This lady lost her job without having a chance to defend herself. That's how I went into her job after that. Um, I saw her Sunday. She says, before I got the job, they told her what happened, and she was at church just crying. And I said, "What happened?" And she told me, and I had to laugh a little bit. I said, "You let them do you like that?" She said, "I never could get in to say anything." So I went, filled in her position, and I'd been there good 3 months and was in a sewing class and was telling everybody, "You got to get these done, and you stop talking, or you're not going to finish them." And this young man, I didn't know who he was, or didn't know what family or anything from him. I heard him say, "I got rid of one teacher, I'll get rid of another one." That's all my. We had buttons on the classroom door, and I hit one of those buttons, and the assistant principal came up. I said, "Get him out of my classroom now." And she said, "Well," I said, "I'll be down behind him later as soon as the class is over." So she took him down. So when the class was over, I had a vacant period, and I went down and told them what they'd said. And I said, "He's not coming back to my class until he apologizes to me and the school and the class in front of everybody. It's not going to be one of these things you're going to hide behind." In other words, I'm saying to myself, treat me like you did this lady that I'm placing. And he came back, I guess, 2 weeks later and apologized to me in front of the class. And I said, "Okay." Treated him like nothing had happened. I like children and want to make them feel good. The next year I got cancer, and that did it. So like you say, you don't go back and get those jobs. And I was satisfied. Then I was cancer 3 years, 3 different times. And young man, to be cancer free now and able to walk and talk and still hear some and I take care of myself. Um, I don't do as well as I'd like to, uh, but I still try really hard. And I'm very thankful to be alive. Very thankful. What else can I tell you now?
I guess just one more question, and then I'll leave you alone for this round. Um, uh, so when did you start teaching when you got out of college? And tell me how you ended up in Wyoming.
Um, After my first husband died of cancer, my second husband died of a heart attack. And so I was left alone with my 3 children in Bristol. I built my own home. My father gave me the property, so I built my own home there. It had 4 rooms downstairs in the bathroom. Below that was a half with a gas furnace. Top floor had 2 bedrooms, kitchen, dining room, living room, and a big fireplace. Had a side patio and a front patio. Um, I worked for Mason's department store. I went to work for the police department in Bristol and was leaving work, going to Mason's with, I had my uniform still on. And the security at Mason's says, "Are you free to work anywhere else?" I says, "I have no idea. Nobody's told me I couldn't or could." So they called the police department and asked me, could they hire me my off time? And they did. So I was just, didn't wear my uniform though. I was like an old lady. Sometimes I'd dress looking like an old lady. Sometimes I'd dress looking like a teenager if possible, and follow you around and see what you're doing. And I was the one, the security would be somewhere walkie-talkie, and I just kind of walk by and look if somebody went through the checkout or either walked by the checkout. And my first one catching somebody stealing was a man came in, and it was kind of funny. He just came in, he freezing to death. He had on a jacket, but it was so he went to the men's department and tried on all the coats, found out what he wanted, and put it on, tore the tags off. And I'm standing maybe 10 feet away, and he put it on, and I'm busy shopping. I had a cart, he thought I was just another customer. And he followed him up front, and one guy was standing up front. If you go through checkout and go through that first door, you caught. Most of the time, they'll even let you go out the door completely. And he couldn't say too much. He tried to say that wasn't his, but that's what I did at Mason's. Well, my last husband, John Gillenwater, I came from the back because I used to check incoming merchandise to make sure the employees weren't stealing it either. And the employees knew who I was, and they knew when they saw me coming through, I would check what on the list of what they were supposed to be getting and what they had. And I was leaving that particular area, was coming down through with John Gillenwater from even when I was married. And what was so funny, when I finished college, I came back to Douglas and taught him in his senior year. And I was older than him. Never forget, when he finally saw me that day, he pulled me aside, and his mother was with him. He said, "What are you doing pulling this lady aside?" He says, "Mom, I know who she is." So it went on from there. And we got married, and he said, "Don't tell anybody you taught me in school." And I said, "Okay, but why do you want to marry me? I'm older than you are." He says, "I didn't worry about that. You don't look like you're older than I am." And I married him. We stayed married for 21 years. He was in the Air Force. And that's how he had been stationed here at Warren Air Force Base. But at that time, he was stationed in the air base in Denver. And so we came out, bought well, not this house, but the one to sit on this property in 69, and lived here. And we got a divorce in 89. We married 21 years. He's still living, I think, in North Carolina. I raised his daughter. Took her at 11 years old. She ended up being the most wonderful viola player that you've ever heard. She finished going to Shawnee Mission West like my 2 boys did. And John wanted to move back. So we came back And Denise finished Central High School here. And UW gave her a full ride scholarship because she could play that well, but she wouldn't take it. Her mother was still living and she wanted to go back with her mother. And being 18, she was privileged to do that. She'd have been 17. I think I would have kept her and made her stay. But you become to be an adult regardless. She was 18. She could go back to mother, and I didn't want her upset either. And when I took her, she was privileged to call her mother anytime she wanted to, or her mother could call her and everything. And she did well in school. John was very upset when he realized um, she was doing so well. He didn't know whether she would or not. When I said, "I'll take her, you're a father, why can't you take care of her?" And her mother wasn't getting along with her husband. And Grandma Gillenwater said, "We can't do this at our age." And they would take her in the summertime and have fun. And so I put her through Shawnee Mission West. She started out with junior high, then went to West and did well. And a matter of fact, I never forget her senior year, she was voted to be the best dressed girl at Shawnee Mission. And that, she thought, really? I said, yeah, because I made her press her jeans and things like that. Not sloppy. You can't come through this mom's house sloppy. Never forget my two sons, not so more my older son as my youngest son. He wanted to grow his afro a little bit longer. I said, "Do you know I've not seen an African with an afro?" And he kind of looked at me. I said, "Let's go look up the encyclopedias and all this," because we didn't have cell phones and all that yet. I said, "You go find me an African that has more than 1 inch hair on his head. I'll let you add another maybe fourth of an inch." You couldn't find one. Couldn't find an African with hair on his head anywhere. A little bit. And they said, Africans didn't have hair. I said, no, they did other things. They had other time to use their brains for without worrying about growing hair on their head. So it was just different. And I was brought up differently, and my children were different. And that's how I got to Wyoming and enjoy being here. This is my home now. And I told my sons before I got, while I was just in 2020, that I was still traveling. And everybody think you just your age. And when I get to the airport to check in, you're what? Because usually they have somebody with them if they're in their 90s traveling with them. I thought, what's wrong with this that I can't go? Well, so now my children say, Mom, just don't do it. So now if you could see me, I think they call me every week to make sure I'm still not driving. But I go where I want. I have a driver's license and everything. But I know in 28, I'm not going to get another driver's license, and that doesn't bother me because I only use it when I really have to. Everything is pretty close to where I need to be. I have a granddaughter that lives in Chattanooga or Ottawa, and her husband's a minister, and he also is an engineer that works for um, what's the dam and all this back there. What do you call it? I see, I've forgotten.
The Tennessee Valley Authority.
Yeah, he works for them. He's an engineer.
Oh.
They both went to the college in Clarksville. I can't remember the name of it, but they both finished college there. She's music. Mm-hmm. And I never get her first year. She says, Grandma, how do you get these children to be quiet? I said, you sit them down and look them dead in the face. I said, they're not paying any attention to you. They're looking at the other way. Get them to look at you. She said, it worked, doesn't it? I said, yes, it works. My mother told me that when I was rearing my own, my son was in the floor doing something, and I'm saying, Rod, don't do so and so and so. And I, do you hear your mom? My mom looked at me. She says, he doesn't know what you're hearing, what you're saying. Turn him around and make him look at you. And
Mm,
I did, and whatever he was doing, he stopped immediately because he heard what mother was saying. The very privileged old lady to be living this long. I just thank God every morning. Thanks for waking me. And I have a chance at this age that I can watch the snowstorms. Oh, you should have been here 3 years ago. I had 37 inches of snow in my front yard, all the way around my house. City was closed down for about 3 days and then finally began to come open.